So, in the internship seminar, when you enter in, the first thing that we're hoping for is that you begin a path of self-discovery. We want you to get to know what you are innately good at in order for you to then go back into your internship site and feel confident and comfortable in doing some of the tasks that you're involved in. I love this particular class because it really is all about you. It's about you trying to understand a little bit more in depth what made you choose this path, because all of you in here have introduced yourselves and a lot of you have different paths or similar paths. We have two nursing, but a different spin on it. And I really enjoy that, and I want you to understand better about who you are and why you chose that path because of who you are. It also helps you to work better in teams and to learn a little bit more about your colleagues, why you interact with your supervisor the way you do, why you interact with each other the way you do in the context of your internship. What's really important is to give you the right language to use. And Type Focus tends to do that. So it helps you to better understand components of yourself and be able to express that. In the future, in the seminar, you're going to be asked to come up with your resume, and you're going to be writing that, and you're going to be talking about aspects of yourself in your resume. And Type Focus can help you to better sort through that language as well. So, in the end, by the time we finish this, we're hoping that you can value the differences. A lot of times we're wondering why people come at things from a specific language or a specific perception. And we want you to have the language to be able to understand that a little bit more. And to be able to go into those situations and understand why you're feeling the way you do, why you express yourself the way you do, and how that other person is expressing themselves and where they're coming from. So, when you went into Type Focus, you have these options in front of you of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when you do self-assessment, you're really focusing in on the personality side. So you should have completed that component. About how long did it take you to finish that? Yeah, like 10 minutes, not very long. So it shouldn't take you too long, and yet it comes up with a wealth of information. In answering, by the time you're done and you've streamlined all of those questions, what you're really answering are 4 questions. How do you prefer to direct your energy? Is it outward? Is it inward? How do you prefer to process information and take information in? How do you prefer to make decisions? And how do you prefer to organize your life? So it's funny that you take 62 questions and that by the time you streamline it and get to the bottom of it, you're really answering 4 questions about yourself. That give you a wealth of information. What happens when you take this is you're going to see somewhat clear, very clear path. And I want you to understand what those bars meant. It is quite clear that I identify most with extroversion. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But being with you all today and having this opportunity to direct my energy outward, it will energize me for the rest of the day. I will be gung-ho. I didn't need my coffee to start, I just needed you. I took this in high school. And when I took this in high school, this is who I was. I took it again when I was in college, and this is who I was. Only thing that's changed are the bars. So, before I had my child, my judging was very clear. What does that mean? It means that I was very organized, very structured. But when you have a child, things change. You become a little more flexible. Doesn't mean I don't like the structure. I enjoy the structure. But things change. And so I adapted to that, but I didn't change. You don't change. It's just the amount to which you identify with changes over the course of your life, okay? What we're going to do today is I'm going to get you up and moving so that you have a better understanding of your innate abilities and interests, and then of your peers, and see how that plays out in working relationships and in your internship. Specifically with extrovert functioning, these people like to direct everything out. We think out loud. So I'll give you an example. In my office suite, there is a door that is typically open, and there's an extrovert on one side and an extrovert on the other side. So I'm one of the extroverts, and my colleague is the other extrovert. And I'll often be talking when I'm working, and she will often be talking when she's working, and we are not talking to one another, but we are yet thinking out loud and working together. So it's quite funny. Once in a while, I will say to her, "Are you talking to me?" "Nope, talking to myself." "Okay, good to know." Now, across the hall from her is an introvert, okay? And that introvert keeps her door closed. Not because she doesn't like us. It's because she needs that time to self. She thinks inward. She does not think with her mouth, as extroverts often do. Often too fast, and sometimes we regret it. We like, as extroverts, working with other people. Really energizes us to be around a group of people. I have to play my thoughts off of other people in order to get to the next stage. Okay? Introverts take information in, they listen intently, they process, and then they speak about it. Sometimes they wish they had the words quicker. But most of the time it's nice, from an extrovert perspective, to know that they are very thoughtful in their process. So, a lot of introverts like to work independently, they're energized that way. They need some additional time to self in order to then go out and be with others. Doesn't mean that introverts in this context don't like being with others, they really do. It's just that the way they need to absorb information, energize themselves, is first with themselves and then outward to everyone else. Okay. So, what I want to do is I want to break the group up. So those of you who identified most with a preference of extrovert, could you come over here? And those who identified most with a preference of introvert, go over there. Okay, so extroverts, talk with me about some of the things that you need in your internship environment in order to use your skills well.
Personally for me, especially as an extrovert, I feel like how people are energized around me really depends on how I work and my work ethic personally. So when I give tours, the people that I give a tour to, it really depends on whether or not they're going to be energized and interactive, and if they are, that's going to energize me, whether it's really early in the morning and I haven't had my coffee, or whether it's like really late in the afternoon and I just want to go home at that point. So if they're really energized, then I'll be energized, but if they're not at all, then that's just completely brings my tour down, and then it doesn't give me a good outcome.
Challenging to play off of
exactly,
that.
yeah.
Right, excellent. Another point that came up here. Please come.
I think a cool thing about extroverts is about how we always like to share our personal information. You don't have to interrogate an extrovert to learn a lot more about them. And I know personally in any job, internship environment, it's nice because you can really connect with people. They build a sense of trust with you because they do know a lot more about you, and they know that they can trust anything that you do say because you're being honest with them.
Right. When you leave your internship environment, you probably have 25 new friends that you refer to, you know. And when an introvert leaves, it tends to be one or two close people that you share those thoughts with, because you don't share them as freely. And what it takes, what do you need to be successful in your internship environment?
For me, at least, it gives me the opportunity to actually watch everything around me. From both my peers and the people that I'm giving tours to. At least for me, I'm able to sample everyone's style and method of actually giving tours, especially when we're all together and bouncing ideas off of each other. And then when I'm in a tour environment, it's very true because I seek to connect with mainly one or two people, and for me, I can actually sit them at the end of the tour, sit them down and actually converse with them, and especially if I find someone with the same career goals in mind, I can sit there and spend half an hour talking to them.
That's beautiful, great answer.
For me, definitely the ability to like think and analyze to myself first, and like double check what I'm saying, because sometimes like we do get questions from the parents and students that are a bit awkward, or sometimes about things that we don't necessarily want to necessarily show off, or think, or maybe some things that we want to try and boost up in our tour. So it gives being an introvert, it allows me to just kind of think about what I'm saying and like kind of do a quick double check to make sure, like to think about what I'm saying and how the people I'm talking to will receive that information.
Right, definitely. And it's important to know that work-related stressors. So when you think about what's been taxing on you, and you had a great point of, if I have a group who's not sharing with me, I find it challenging to work with that, within that, and that can cause stress. Not extreme stress for you, I'm sure, but it's still a stressor. So for extroverts, having to work alone, communicating only by email, not interacting with people, actually taking the time to process and reflect, as Victoria mentioned, prior to, it could be challenging because we just keep talking it through. That's how we think about it. So having the opportunities to interact, having rich discussion, that's really meaningful, and that's how we learn best. So those environments provide us with rich learning opportunities. For introversion, being able to work with others in the context of feeding the whole group. Like you mentioned, it's nice when you're able to sit down one-on-one and have a deeper conversation, where extroverts like a broad conversation. And don't mind being that center of attention and entertaining, where afterwards having that in-depth time is more meaningful for you. So having to do things like talk on the phone a lot of tasks happening at once, a lot of verbal feedback at once, being able to process that takes time. So I also say, think about it in the context of the classes that you've liked the best. So for extroverts, having the rich discussion classes versus having a lecture where you are trying to listen the entire time can be a little more challenging. Where for a lecture, it might be okay for you to absorb, process the information, go back into something like a presentation or a lab, and be able to then say, okay, I get it, and this is what I want to say now. So think about that, because it plays out not just in our internship, but also in the classes that you're choosing later on. So how do you cope with some of these differences? If your preference, and in particular here, let's focus on if your preference is introversion, but your work group tends to be a lot of extroversion, what do you do? And so I've known these tactics to work for quite a few people, where if you arrive a little bit early and you take the time for yourself prior to, that seems to work. Or having private time at some point in the day, whether you go off for yourself for lunch. It's not as though they don't like you, but they need that to re-energize, you know? And it's understanding that that's happening and why that's happening so that you have a better functioning work relationship. So again, what I want you to continue to reflect on, especially for the internship seminar, is, and I'm blocking it, how does understanding how you direct your energy impact your role and relationships with colleagues in the context of your internship? Some of us process information in a very step-by-step manner, need to see it, taste it, touch it to know it's true. Those are our sensors. Others of us use our imagination quite a bit. We think big, like Evan. Think about what are the possibilities, use our imagination in thinking through those possibilities. That's an intuitive. Think about your favorite classes. Were they taught by an intuitive? Were they taught big picture using anecdotes, sharing information, using imagination and innovation? Were they taught in a step-by-step, here's what you need to know manner, language, engineering?
Yeah.
Okay, so our intuitives often excel in opportunities where you are given a project and you're allowed to just take it and run with it. And that happens a lot to Devlin and to Lauren, who are my interns, who I'll say, I'm not really caring step by step how you decide to get this project done. In the end, here's my expectation, create it any way you wish. Now, if I did that to you, we wouldn't be working together much longer. Because it wouldn't be the right fit. It doesn't feed your need or your talent. So, obviously, when I'm teaching, it's best for me to be teaching to intuitives because you get me. Thank you. God, thank you. Big picture. What's really happening overall here that I need to be caring about, thinking about when I go about this particular role? Rather than what's happening in the here and now in the present. Both equally important. We just go about it very different ways. What was your favorite class?
Calculus. My last calculus. Sorry. It was.
No one's gonna identify with that.
I'm at a point in my engineering classes where calculus was one of my favorite classes. So.
Tell me why.
I think it was mainly the professor. He was definitely not a censor. He was, I don't know, we just had to trust the process of what he was doing.
He was intuitive.
Yeah, and
good.
he just like lit up the whole class. So.
Yeah. So it was his energy more than anything?
Yeah. I mean,
That's good.
calc is still calc no matter what class you take.
It
but-
really is, yeah, the content. Yeah. And content in calc, you have to go from understanding this concept to then understanding this concept to finally getting this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do have that step by step. You can see it. It is concrete. There are defined answers in the end. And then how many of you over here are in majors that you have courses where there is no defined answer some of the time? Yeah, and that makes sense. And it's good that you're comfortable with that ambiguity and that big picture thinking. And it's good that you're comfortable with the concrete, defined information. Because in the end, you're going to have to work together. And when you put teams together, having someone who has an understanding of the big picture along with the details and the concrete, it really makes a solid team. And more companies, when they build teams, are looking at that. So they're trying to bring in a few sensors, bring in a few intuitives in order to maximize their talent that's working on a particular project. And as we go on, you will definitely see why. It's important to gain your perspective. So when you have meetings now in the future as a group, do you have meetings together?
Yeah.
I want you to pay attention to what's being said because you're probably going to come back to the details, probably come back to the logistics. And that's going to be important.
Oh, especially with tour guiding. For example, we get a weekly of who's going out on tours. So like I know like mentally like when I'm going out. And especially with like last minute changes, I mean, it's not a really big impact, but it kind of does throw me off.
Yeah,
So,
think that through again.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
At my job, I work with a lot of intuitives, so when they come up with a big idea, I automatically thought, okay, step by step, how am I going to make this happen in my own office? So I sometimes would volunteer a lot of information, say, okay, this is something that I can do in 5 minutes, step by step, lay out, a to-do list, and say, yeah, this can happen, or I can say, this is too big of a picture, this might take us some time to have this created.
Right. And that's going to be equally important for that conversation to take place so that you're bringing the intuitive, reining them in on the details and what it really requires in order to get to that point. Great. And for intuitives, talk with me about some of the things that you are innately good at your internship because you are intuitive.
I feel like I'm huge on goal setting. Like I have daily goals, I have weekly goals, I have semesterly goals, I have goals down the line, and I don't necessarily think about what steps I'm going to take in order to get where I want to be.
Yeah.
And then after those, I have to go back and make that to-do list or see that calendar to really know how long and what steps it's going to entail to get there.
Good.
So.
Great. Lauren.
I think especially in my internship, you always come to us and you're like, so there's this event and let's find out how we can get people there and why it's important. So I think it works perfectly with my major because in terms of the events that we coordinate, you have to find out what the goal of the entire event is and how we get people there and how we get them engaged.
Right.
And as a communications major, I already have to find out all those things about people already. So I apply things I've learned in my classes to my internship to make events successful.
Beautiful. Allows you that creativity that an intuitive longs for in their environment. Good. Any other examples? Please.
Intuitives really trust inspiration and like new ideas, and I like hearing new ideas from all the tour guides on how to perfect the tour or what we can say and how to change what we can say at specific locations on campus.
Right.
And I love hearing that and putting that to use when it comes time to reorganizing the tour if we need it.
Great. Good. Start to think about too what the value is in working between intuitive and sensors and when that's going to maximize what you know to be true. So when you look at stressors for intuitives, reality sometimes can be a real bummer. Only because when you're thinking big picture and you're feeling like we could do this. You could, if, cute Richard, you had this, and this set up. And then it's like, oh, okay, fun killer. That's fine. So let's rethink that. But really, it's a reality dose. And that's exactly what we need at the time, because then it gives us that step by step. Sometimes details do get in the way for intuitives. For example, your point about having an event to plan and being able to bring a group of people together. Okay, so the sensors coming into this will say, well, how would we market to them? And what's the best way to reach them? And at what point in time do we want to do this? We should map out a timeline for ourselves to do that, where the intuitives are going to say, we're just going to do it. and you will. But you also need the sensor to come in and help with that. So the practicalities, the realities, we often try to avoid as intuitives, and we just really look at that big picture overall. Then for sensors, what is a stressor? Having to take things that are working well and do them differently. Why would I try to fix it? It is not broken. But in some ways, we're always refining. So when you look at that tour and you say, okay, there's a detour now. What do I do? And intuitive's like, we're going to go this way. I'm going to talk about that building. I don't know much about it, but it's the norm, okay? So you for that sensor, it's going to be, okay, so I'm going to map this out. I need to know the details. I want to make sure that I'm doing this well. And then I've got it wrapped around my mind before I enter into it. If your preference is sensing and your work group is intuitive, what are the differences? So I think getting involved with projects requiring long range, future thinking. So beyond this summer, what are you thinking? And how does this play a role in that future? Brainstorming with the rest of the team because you want everything very systematic. And so keep that in mind in order to have richer discussion now that you understand where she's coming from and what she's adding to the discussion. And then looking for those patterns and things. So again, it goes back to if you have to problem solve and reroute yourself, how do you do that with minimal stress, knowing who you are now? And that's what we always come back to is problem solving and being able to take the initiative to get something accomplished in our site when we see that it needs to be. So there's always ways to refine things. And the reason you were brought into your internship is because you have a voice in that, and that voice is strong, so you need to use it. So think about, in the context of who you are, why you were brought in and how to use that voice in order to understand how what you pay attention to, how you process information really does play a role and impact your internship site. When we make decisions, we make them two different ways. We make them based on people and emotion, or we make them based on fact and logic. It's really clear, it's a very clear-cut thing, and yet it leads to the most miscommunication. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by it because people don't often recognize it, and it leads to argument or confrontation, which we'll need to solve, especially in the context of your internship. If you are in this safe learning environment, we have to find a way for you to better understand who you are and how to solve a problem or how to resolve something in the context of this specific learning space and learning environment. So, what do feelers like? Feelers like harmony. They love being around and working with and for people. That's what they're doing always. When they choose their major, it's usually about people. They have this innate empathetic nature in them. It's beautiful. They're just always considering the people behind the story. And then when they make that decision, it goes back to how it will influence the people involved. Thinkers take a very different turn on that, and in fact use logic. They say, what's the situation? Given this situation, here's what I see. And they can do it without having to get emotion or people involved. That is also a really beautiful thing to hear. Because you need to sometimes separate the people from the logic and the fact of the situation in order to make an effective decision that's going to be influential from there on out, right? So, thinkers, talk with me about the context of you being a thinker in your major and why that is a good thing for you.
I was just telling Kevin before that the phrase that you'll hear the most as an engineer is think like an engineer. And the first time you hear it, you're like, I'm paying you to teach me how to think like an engineer.
Awesome, right?
And
thank you, Sensor.
yeah. But after a while, you kind of realize they want you to be more analytical and just think of the logistics of everything. As in, will there be enough time to have this project and do everything that we all want to do? Like, there has to be that one person that says, no, like, let's look at the big picture of it, like everything, instead of just working on the specific part.
Great example.
I'm a nursing major again, and I think thinking and treating everybody equally as patients is really important, and also being able to make logical decisions that are void of any feelings for that patient or for the situation are really important for any medical field.
All right, feelers, talk about in the context of your major, please.
So with anthropology, even though it is more of like a scientific method-based analysis,
Right.
It's still being a feeler allows me to get an idea of what subjects are like feeling about my research,
Sure.
being able to see things from their point of view, so to make research less biased.
Right.
Also, going into my next thing with anthropology, not anthropology, sorry, Chinese and French.
Yes.
Studying those, being a feeler allows me to like see things from that culture's point of view.
Beautiful.
So it helps me to not just be able to use the language, but use the language in the same way a native speaker would,
I love
which
it.
helps me.
No, I think that's great. I think that you captured it beautifully because by studying the language, it can be a thinking profession. You can take it from either standpoint, but from the context of the feeler, you're saying, I'm able to connect with the culture behind the language. I'm able to connect with the people, and that's what makes it richer for me. Beautiful.
It's so funny because Kevin over there is a nursing major and I'm a nursing major, and as a feeler, I see it so differently. Instead of being void of emotion, or like connection, that's what I love about nursing is that I have, and that's why I didn't go into say being a doctor, because I had that opportunity to connect the patients and see the patient as a whole instead of just as a disease or a certain medication that they're on.
Right.
Be able to see like lifestyle and religion and their background and things like that. So.
Right. And what will be interesting is the two of you in the same place. So if you're both now interns, let's go back to the hospital, and you're both interns at the hospital. And you're dealing with a situation on your floor where you have a patient who is in need. You're going to look at that patient from this angle. And you're going to look at this patient from this angle. And that patient needs both of you to do that. Because you're going to feed into that emotion, and you're going to feed into what the medicine is doing to prevent future issue. Not that you're not, but you're also looking at the person behind it, and you're looking at the study behind it. And it's a beautiful combination when you bridge the two, right? So start to continue to think about that, how these differences play out in your internship. I want to go back to the nursing point again for a minute too. When you leave at the end of the day, your patients are going to be on your mind. When you leave at the end of the day, what's going to be on your mind? Dinner.
I mean, I think dinner's always like Kevin's money.
Fair enough. But the point of it is you're hungry, you're going to eat, that's the logic. Here's what you've been given.
Yeah.
You might not eat that night because you're so torn up. So that means too, you two have to have a conversation because it needs balance. And you're going to have to balance. And even in the situation where your supervisor brings you in and asks you to hire the next intern, you need balance in that conversation to make sure you're doing the right thing. And also think about if you were in that position where your supervisor brought you in and asked you to hire, what skills do you currently have, and what skills could this person bring to the table? So always keep thinking about how do I continue to create balance in that work environment so that all perspectives are heard. Right? When we look at stressors, for thinkers, having to use that personal experience sometimes is not always fair because you think, well, that's personal. Logically, here's what the situation presents itself with. Adjusting to individual differences and needs. It's funny to say it as an extreme feeler. So focus on processes and people in that process. So if you are a manager as a thinker, you have to consider people as well. And that sometimes in doing so, and think about professors you've had, because that's the best context I probably have for students. If a professor says, here's what I do, I have no exceptions, this is what's required. And the feeler comes in, and actually it's my last couple weeks of class, so my feeling students are coming to me now saying, yeah, but Kim, this is what just happened to me. So do I take it step by step and individual? Or do I say, there's one standard for all students enrolled in my class, and here's what it is, despite what happens to you? Number two. Said the thinker strongly. I get it. So when you're in this situation and you do have to consider people, think about that. And then stressors for feelers, having to analyze a situation objectively, removing the emotion behind it. Because we have a difficult time thinking outside of our social nature, it's challenging to just step back and look at the facts of the situation. Focus on just tasks and doing something very decisive rather than taking the time to play out all scenarios and then make the decision. In this group, we mostly had feelers. So if your preference is thinking, but you have a significant number of feelers in your group, just think about those as possible tactics for when you're in an environment that's requiring you all to make decisions together that are going to sort of embark on the differences between thinking and feeling. And finally, when you're making decisions in your internship, think about the impact that you have as a thinker or a feeler and how that is a positive for your internship site. That one's special. Yeah. All right. Also another favorite. And sometimes some of the comments that we had from sensing and intuitive play out in this one as well, because processing and organizing our life overlap a lot of the time. So sometimes when we organize our life, we do it in a way in which it involves color coding, or calendars, or lists, or post-it notes. We like to have a list and then cross it out because you feel very accomplished. Because it's not enough to start it, you have to finish it. And you don't feel the validation until you finish it. And sometimes you like to think about having a calendar because you don't need it. It's fine. You'll remember. You like flexibility. You like the opportunity to stretch deadlines because they're semi-elastic in your world. For those of you who need your calendar, like to color code, you are considered judges or J. Can I have you over there? And for you perceivers, deadlines are elastic, Ps. So perceivers, in the context of your major or your internship, talk with me about some of the things that, it's good to be a P.
Well, I work well under pressure, so something's due in like 2 weeks. The 5 hours before it's due is when I'll start, and then it gets done, and it's brilliant. So
It's brilliant, huh?
I work well under pressure.
Excellent.
I think responding well to change in plans of anything, because everything's like for judges, everything's very planned out, organized, list oriented.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, you can just sort of go with whatever's happening.
Very flexible individuals. Yeah, so if a change in plan comes about, or if a judge says, hey, let's go do this now, I had you, scheduled for this, you can just go, and it doesn't faze you. That's a beautiful thing. Somebody else.
I was given 2 weeks to put together a carnival, and I actually waited till the actual last week to start ordering all the carnival equipment popcorns got given me, and I got it done.
Well
It was a success.
done. Good for you.
That's stressing.
Yeah.
I like being kind of rushed to do it.
Rushed at the end. Lists. Any lists?
I feel like I'm really good about things that I have to do,
Yeah.
like class, work.
Yeah.
I'll write that down, I'll put that on there, but when it comes to like free time, I like to keep my options open.
Why?
I don't know, because I like to weigh my options and explore what different things I could do.
Right.
And if it's doing something not so fun compared to doing something really fun,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do something.
Then you'll just switch. Yeah.
Rigid plans make me nervous. Like, if I have, like, if you're like, all right, in 2 weeks we're going to get dinner and we're going to go here, it's like
Too far in advance.
Tell me 2 or 3 hours before.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, 2 or 3
I'll
hours
still come, I
before,
promise.
yeah. I'm doing something, but if I'm not, that works. That way
So
I
the
can switch.
commitment is too much for you.
Yeah.
It has
Don't-
to be
I
elastic.
don't do commitment.
Commitment's horrifying.
Oh, God. We'll have to talk about your relationships after. Conversation to have. All right. But for the sake of time and only for that, I will
Save that
switch
for
over to the judges. All right. Tell me about your relationship with your major and with your internship and how being a judger is a good thing. Go ahead.
I find that I am the epitome of a planner. Everything matches in my life, and I do write everything down, but being a marketing major, I've really found has helped me to kind of grow and understand the benefits of being a perceiver. It's something where in my classes I'm always asked to be creative and take a project where I would like it to go. And that's not how I used to operate in the past, so I think that kind of pushing myself in my marketing internships and in my marketing classes has helped me to kind of learn how to relax and know that everything will get done in the end, but that I still will try and plan it so that it does definitely get done.
Very good.
Well, for me, I'm on the low end of judging. Actually, in high school, I tested as P.
As a P, okay, so yeah, you're just at the border.
Yeah, but like I need to know like everything, like what's going on. I need that like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But I'm not so extreme that like I don't care about planners and calendars. I don't care. I keep it like in my head, or like we'll reference something else to like figure it out. But I know I lost where I was going.
We'll come back if you think of that, please.
I probably have a planner in every way possible, online and everything. And for me being a judger, and it's funny because a lot of engineering professors are perceivers. So they'll give you a syllabus and I'll put in all the stuff and they'll just randomly during the semester, you know what, I'm going to change this exam to a week ahead. And that just makes me turn red in all kinds of ways. Like, it just drives me crazy as just being someone who likes to plan things, but definitely in terms of like being a tour guide, learning to roll with the punches is definitely something that I've been working on because things are going to happen. I personally just love planning everything out in terms of having structure.
You feel like more comfort
And
in
you
that
feel like you're more in
structure.
control
Yeah.
of everything.
Yeah, definitely. This plays out in our work environment too. So perceivers often have a slightly messier office. You might have some piles, things might not get put away. Demo, we'll talk about that later. But knowing that about yourself is really important because I, again, share that office space, just one door, always open, with a perceiver. So think about that in the context of a judge's work environment. You need clean space. You need to have all of that in order before you're even able to go on to your project. And that's really interesting because when you are studying or finding a study environment, when you're in a work environment, you need your area to be free of clutter. And that's the difference between a judge and a perceiver. You can ignore that environment as a perceiver and just get right to what you need to do at that point in time. It's such a gift to be able to do that. And it's really sometimes, as a judge, I would say, torture for us because you have to clean before you're able to even do. And as judges, you really get excited when you complete that project. When it comes to the end, you feel a lot of excitement on that. And for perceivers, just even getting in and starting that project is a really cool thing. You want the right supervisor, you want the right work environment, and don't settle until you find that. Okay, so stressors for judges. When people say to you, trust the process, you might shake a little because you really just want to have something emerge. Too much flexibility, you want to have set deadlines, you just feel comfortable in that routine, in that understanding. Where perceivers, you either having to organize yourself or having someone else organize you can sometimes be a little constricting. And it doesn't allow for that flexibility in thought. Creating alternative plans right away, so you have an A, B, and C. I like the face I'm getting, which is, I didn't have an A. Why would I have a C? And being required to plan ahead. Perceivers. So if your preference is perceiving, but you're living in a judging work world, recognize that deadlines are not really negotiable. So things like you have a tour at this specific time and you must be there at this specific time and you must end by this time to come back and do this. So you're wondering where your perceivers are. They are still on the tour because something else happened and they want to go do something else and this seemed like a good idea at the time. And it might have been. So again, as as an intern, think about how you organize yourself in your internship, how that impacts your clients, your colleagues, your supervisor, and ultimately yourself and your success. One of the things I wanted to say is that under success at work in type focus, you can actually put in 2 different types. So you and a partner, okay? When you do that, you can see your strengths, you can see what happens under stress, and how to remedy that. I think this is a great thing to do for yourselves, so that if you've had conflict or confrontation with another intern, or with your supervisor or another colleague, you want to understand how to cope with that effectively. How do you use your emotional maturity in order to do this? So this gives you some tactics and ideas and strategies behind it. This is my office mate next door to me, and you can see that extrovert to extrovert, we have similar things. We really do breed a lot of contagious enthusiasm off of one another. Just when you pass our offices, you'll see that happening. And so sometimes it's perceived that it's too much fun. I don't think that's possible in the work environment. So I want you to keep that always in mind, because when you feel like you are really good at something, and when you feel like this is actually fun and you want to come in every day, then you know it's the right thing for you. Sometimes, as an intern, receiving feedback can be a challenge. As an extrovert, you want to have that discussion. As an introvert, you want time to reflect on those points that are being made. Keep all this in mind. I like this layout. It really helps people to better understand that when you're working with your supervisor, if they're not delivering feedback in an effective manner for you, you have that opportunity to say, I know who I am, here's what I need, can I ask you to give it to me in this way? This is most beneficial for me. Ultimately, we hope that over the course of your internship, you grow in your understanding of working with a team, you're able to communicate more effectively, you're able to solve problems, you're able to analyze a situation and move forward, and you're taking the initiative to move forward on that and assert yourself when you see it fit. So problem solving and understanding that is going to be extremely important. Next steps. So how will you, as an intern, use your new working knowledge of type focus in your current internship and beyond? Before we start type focus, I want you to have a fundamental understanding of the psychology behind type focus and where this came from. Do we have anybody who's studying any type of psychology? Great. Excellent. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist who wanted to better understand the psyche, the human psyche, and how personality influences brain and brain functioning, what we do, why we do it, how we do it. So when we delve into things, he was really looking at answering 3 different questions. One is, how do you prefer to direct your energy? How do you prefer to process information? And how do you prefer to make decisions? And so he spent most of his life work trying to answer those 3 questions. He did that, and then Myers-Briggs, which was a mother-daughter team, came along and added a 4th dimension to Jung's work, building on his years of study. And that 4th dimension was, how do you organize your life? When they compiled all of that, I like to say they marketed his plan, and they came up with an assessment. And that assessment is about 120 questions. It's 120 questions, and it leads you to having a better understanding of yourself. What are your innate abilities and skills? Why do you do the things that you do? So they really did capitalize on all of his work, and then they made money from it. Myers-Briggs assessment is quite expensive. And since you attend a state school, we're going to do this one, which is type focus. So we have a site license to use this. So rather than having one, you have to pay for a Myers-Briggs assessment, which you could definitely do on your own. But the results often are the same, and that's why we use type focus. Type focus also helps you throughout your college career. Some of you might have taken this in URI 101 when you first started college. Why do we do that? It's because we were knowing that entering college is really a path of self-discovery. So you're trying to figure out who you are, trying to figure out what you're good at, and trying to figure out what major is right for you. By the time you get through that first year, into your second year, you're trying to figure out what career is right for you. So you have a small gap in time to really think about that. And type focus is there to help make meaning and give you language behind that so it makes more sense and you can put it into context. So when you say, I'm a psychology major, I'm a nursing major, and here's why I'm good at that major, here's why I'm good at that profession, it's really going to help you along the way. So that is why we're using type focus, and that's a brief overview and introduction to what we're going to delve into today in the internship seminar.